Okay, so get ready because today we're going deep on this whole fake spacewalk thing. You know, all those conspiracy theories floating around about NASA faking it all. I got to say, I'm pretty skeptical, but
Yeah.
also kind of curious to see what's out there. So we've got this YouTube video. It's called Fake FakeSpacewalks.proof.mp3. It's by a user named Jiranism, and it's pretty entertaining, honestly. It makes you think twice about all those official NASA videos we see.
Yeah, a little healthy skepticism never hurt anybody,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about something as crazy as faking a whole spacewalk. I can maybe try to clear up some of the science behind the stuff we're going to hear.
Perfect. Because Jiranism really gets right into it. They start with this footage from a spacewalk back on March 24th, 2017. And they're big proof. They point to these bubbles they say are escaping from the airlock.
Bubbles, huh? Okay, well, filming in space, it's a lot more complicated than people think. And even something as simple as depressurizing an airlock can release debris, like tiny bits of stuff. Or ice. You know, and on a grainy video that could easily look like bubbles, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But Jiranism actually plays a clip from the video. And they point out these bubbles and say they're defying physics because they seem to be rising to the surface. And they even, like, turn the video to make it look like the bubbles are going straight up.
Ah, so that's where it gets kind of tricky, understanding how things work in space. Because here on Earth, yeah, bubbles rise. But in space, there's no up or down. It's microgravity. So those bubbles could be moving in any direction, really. It all depends on the camera angle, like what looks like up to us might be sideways or even down from where the astronaut is.
Hold on, I'm a little confused. So you're saying there's no up in space?
Well, not in the same way we think of it here. It's all relative, right? Think of it like if you're floating in the middle of a pool. Which way is up? It depends on which way your head is, right?
Hmm. Yeah, okay. I guess it is all about perspective then. What looks like totally crazy in the video could actually be normal if you know the whole picture.
Exactly. And jumping to conclusions like that without understanding the bigger picture, it can lead to all sorts of misconceptions, like judging a book by its cover, or in this case, judging a spacewalk by a few seconds of blurry video.
Right. Okay, so let's follow this trail a little further. The video compares some glitchy footage of the Earth from the spacewalk with another clip that shows like a totally flat horizon. And Jiranism seems to be suggesting that NASA is being sneaky with how Earth's curvature looks in the videos. Like maybe it's not a perfect sphere after all.
Okay, so with this one, we got to remember video technology, it isn't perfect, especially when you're dealing with footage from space. There's compression, editing choices, even the angle of the shot. It can all make things look different. Like, have you ever seen those pictures where someone's holding up the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It's just an illusion because of the camera angle.
Oh, yeah, totally. So you're saying what looks like a flat Earth in the video
Yeah.
might just be a trick of the camera and the editing.
Yeah. Exactly. Plus, if NASA was really trying to fake a spacewalk, don't you think they'd make sure the Earth always looked perfectly round? It just seems like a weird detail to miss.
Yeah, you're right. That part seems a little fishy to me. But this is where things take a turn. Jiranism starts bringing in, like, biblical references
Yeah.
and numerology to back up their claims.
Oh, wow. So now we're moving away from science and into the realm of personal beliefs.
Yeah, they talk about this Hebrew word nasha and how using something called gematria, the letters in NASA add up to 666. Honestly, it sounds a little out there.
It's definitely an interesting interpretation. But remember, just because something seems to fit a certain narrative doesn't make it true. You can find patterns and meaning anywhere you look hard enough, but that doesn't necessarily mean those patterns actually mean anything.
Yeah, it's like those people who see the Virgin Mary in a grilled cheese sandwich. It's all about interpretation. So connecting Nasha and 666 to NASA, is that really a good argument?
Well, scientifically speaking, not really. It's more of a symbolic thing than actual evidence. It's really important to be able to separate personal beliefs from actual scientific facts.
Okay, so it's like they're saying, hey, even the Bible says NASA's up to no good. But that's just their interpretation.
Right. And we should always be careful about claims like that, especially when they lean so heavily on symbolism or numerology. Anyone can read tea leaves, but that doesn't make it a good way to predict the future.
That's a good analogy. So even though Jiranism brings in all of this stuff,
Yeah.
it seems like we need to be careful about getting tangled up in it without considering the bigger picture, right?
Yeah, it's all about being aware of our own biases.
Yeah.
And being open to different explanations. It's so easy to fall into this confirmation bias trap, looking only for information that agrees with what you already believe. It's like if you're already convinced spacewalks are fake, any little thing that seems weird in the video is going to seem like proof to you.
So how do we avoid that? How do we stay curious and also keep our critical thinking skills sharp?
That's the big question, isn't it? But I think the key is being okay with being wrong. Asking yourself, what if I'm missing something? What other explanations could there be?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we've got the bubbles, the Earth's curvature, and now this whole biblical numerology thing. What else does Juranism bring up as proof?
Well, they talk a lot about the cost of space exploration. They really hammer home the idea that NASA is spending millions of taxpayer dollars every day. And they kind of imply that this funding could be used for better things, or even that NASA has a financial incentive to keep up this faked spacewalk act.
Wait, are they suggesting that faking spacewalks is somehow cheaper than actually going to space? Doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold claim, but it does raise an interesting question. What is the real cost of space exploration? And is it worth it? Especially when we have so many problems here on Earth that need attention.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars going into space programs while people are struggling just to get by here on Earth. It's a tough question.
Absolutely. No easy answers. But maybe that's a good place to start next. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's unpack this whole cost-benefit thing about space exploration.
Mhm.
Honestly, it's something I've thought about myself. Is it just about pushing the limits and exploring? Or are there more down-to-earth benefits for us here?
Those are the right questions to be asking. And maybe by the end of this deep dive, we'll have a clearer idea of the bigger picture. So about those big dollar figures Juranism keeps bringing up about space exploration. They say NASA spends something like $50 million a day, which, I mean, it does make you wonder if it's all worth it.
Yeah, honestly, that number is kind of mind-blowing. $50 million a day. Think of all the schools and hospitals you could build with that. So how do we even begin to weigh those costs against whatever benefits come from space?
It's a tough balance for sure. But here's the thing. Space exploration isn't just about, planting flags and taking pretty pictures. It actually drives a lot of the technology we use every single day here on Earth.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. The benefits aren't just up in space, right?
Exactly. Like, think about GPS for a second. That came from satellite technology that was developed for space. Same with satellite communication. That's how we can make phone calls and watch live TV from almost anywhere. And even weather forecasting relies heavily on satellites orbiting the Earth.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that. It's easy to forget how much we depend on that stuff.
Right, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Medical imaging like MRI and CT scans, those have benefited from space technology too. Water purification, energy efficient solar panels, even the materials they use for airplanes and prosthetic limbs. It all traces back to space research in some way.
That's incredible. So, in a way, investing in space is like investing in all these other areas that affect us directly.
Exactly. It's all about pushing the limits of what we can do. And a lot of times that leads to these breakthroughs that end up impacting all kinds of fields.
Okay, yeah, that makes the whole cost thing a little easier to think about. But what about Juranism's point that maybe there's a financial reason to fake the spacewalks? Like maybe it's actually cheaper to fake it than do it for real.
Well, that's where things get tricky. I mean, think about it. Faking something as big as a space program, you'd need a huge cover-up with thousands of people involved. Scientists, engineers, astronauts, technicians, everybody. Plus all the other countries with space programs. Would they all be in on it too?
Yeah, that seems pretty unlikely. Like, wouldn't someone have said something by now? And wouldn't it just be easier and cheaper to actually go to space?
Right. Just the logistics of that kind of conspiracy would be insane. And then the technology you'd need to fake it all. Sound stages, zero-gravity simulators, crazy special effects. It probably costs just as much, if not more, than going to space for real.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess the fake it to save money theory doesn't really hold up.
Yeah, I'd say it's a lot more likely that the weird things we see in the footage have simpler explanations, like the camera angles and video compression we talked about earlier.
All right, so back to the video. Juranism mentions something else that caught my attention. They say that Russian astronauts found sea plankton on the windows of the ISS. Is there any truth to that?
Ugh, the plankton story. That one's been going around for a while. It's a perfect example of how a little bit of truth can get blown way out of proportion.
So what's the real story then?
Well, it is true that in 2014, the Russian space agency, Roscosmos, they announced that they found some microscopic organisms on the outside of the ISS. But their explanation was a lot less exciting than the whole proof that space is fake thing.
Okay, so what did they say put the plankton up there?
They said it was probably because of something called bioaerosols, basically tiny particles like plankton or spores that get carried up into the atmosphere by air currents. Apparently, they can reach really high altitudes. even as high as the stratosphere.
Wow, so these tiny plankton were just hitching a ride all the way up to the space station. That's pretty wild.
It is. It reminds us that life can show up in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, but it still sounds strange. Plankton in space. How do we know they didn't just come from someone's fish tank on the ISS?
Huh. Good question. And to be fair, not every scientist was totally convinced by the bioaerosol theory. Some people thought they needed to investigate more. But the point is, there's a big difference between something unusual happening, which it obviously did, and saying that it proves there's a huge conspiracy going on.
Right, right. It's easy to get carried away with those what-if ideas.
Yeah,
But we have to remember that sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one.
absolutely. And in this case, the bioaerosol theory makes sense based on what we know about how the atmosphere works and how tiny organisms can travel really long distances.
Okay, so we've debunked the bubbles, the flat Earth, the numerology, and now the plankton. Is there anything else in the video we should look at?
Well, there's one more part of Jeranism's argument I think is worth talking about. It's something a lot of people bring up about space exploration, even people who don't believe in conspiracy theories.
Oh, what's that?
It's the whole question of inspiration and the benefits of space exploration that you can't really measure. Jeranism kind of ignores this and focuses only on the money, but I think it's an important part of the conversation.
I see what you mean. Like, even if there were no practical benefits from space exploration,
Yeah.
wouldn't it still be worth doing? Just because it inspires us to think bigger and aim higher.
Exactly. Think about the Apollo missions. Landing on the moon, that was a huge accomplishment. It captured everyone's imagination. It showed what we can achieve when we work together towards a common goal.
Yeah, and even today, the pictures from the Hubble telescope, those amazing images of galaxies, they make you feel so small, but also connected to something much bigger than yourself.
It's like a reminder of how vast and mysterious the universe is, and our place in it, and that sense of wonder, that curiosity. That's what drives science and innovation.
So even if we never find aliens or build a colony on Mars, just exploring space has value that goes beyond any practical benefit.
Exactly. It's about pushing the boundaries of knowledge, understanding the universe better, and inspiring future generations to dream big. And that's not something you can put a price tag on.
That's a great way to put it. So while we should definitely be aware of the cost of space exploration, it seems like the potential benefits, both practical and inspirational, are pretty big.
Absolutely. It's all about finding the right balance and making sure that we're investing responsibly and sustainably for the long term.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We looked at the evidence, different perspectives, even the philosophy of space exploration. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. It's crazy how easy it is to get sucked into a good story. Even when the evidence is kind of flimsy, like Jeranism's video with the music and the whole "look, here's the proof" thing, I can see how people would fall for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, humans are storytelling creatures, right? Stories help us understand the world. But sometimes that same instinct can lead us in the wrong direction, especially when those stories play on our fears or make us distrust authority.
Yeah, like who doesn't love a good conspiracy theory every now and then? It's fun to think that maybe you know something most people don't. But where's the line between healthy skepticism and, like, going too far down the rabbit hole?
It's a tough one. I don't think there's a perfect answer. But one thing I always come back to is this. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence.
Okay, yeah. So saying NASA is faking spacewalks, that's a pretty big claim. What kind of evidence would we need to see to actually believe that?
It would take more than just some blurry video and a few coincidences. We'd need something solid, something you can check, something that can't be explained away by like camera angles or editing tricks, or just not understanding how things work in space.
So like if someone had blueprints of a secret underwater stage where they're filming everything, or if a bunch of astronauts came forward and said it was all fake, that would be pretty convincing, right?
Exactly. That would be the kind of extraordinary evidence that would make you really question things. But so far, we haven't seen anything like that.
Okay, so it's all about the evidence. But most of us aren't scientists or engineers, right? We don't know how to analyze all the data or debunk every conspiracy theory. So how can we be smarter about the information we come across? How do we sort through all the noise and find the truth?
That's where critical thinking comes in. And that's something anyone can learn to do. It doesn't mean being cynical or not believing anything. It's about asking questions, looking at things from different angles, and really thinking about the information you're given.
So it's like being a detective, right?
Exactly. You got to gather the evidence, figure out the motives, and then come to a conclusion based on what you find. And it all starts with knowing your own biases. Everyone has them. whether they realize it or not. And those biases can affect how you see information. So the first step is to ask yourself, am I being objective here, or am I letting my own opinions get in the way?
Right. It's so easy to fall into that trap, believing something just because it fits with what you already think, even if it's not completely true. So how do we make sure we're not just picking and choosing the evidence we like?
One thing that helps is to look for opinions that disagree with yours. If you think you believe something, try to find reliable sources that say the opposite. See if their arguments make sense. It might challenge your thinking, but that's a good thing. It means you're really using your critical thinking skills.
Yeah, if you only watch one news channel or read one kind of website, you're not getting the whole picture.
Exactly. You got to expose yourself to different viewpoints and be open to information that makes you uncomfortable. That's how you learn and grow.
So we need to know our biases, look for different opinions, and be careful about the evidence. Any other tips for being a better critical thinker?
One more that's really important. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's okay to admit you don't have all the answers. In fact, that's often the best way to start learning something new.
I like that. Be curious and be okay with maybe being wrong.
Exactly. And remember, critical thinking isn't just about conspiracy theories. It's useful for everything. It helps you make better decisions, solve problems, and just navigate a world that's full of information.
Well, I think this whole deep dive has been a great lesson in critical thinking. We looked at the claims, the evidence, and the bigger picture. I definitely learned a lot.
Me too. Hopefully our listeners did too.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and never stop learning. The world is full of amazing things, and it's up to us to approach them with curiosity and a healthy amount of skepticism. And remember, the truth is out there waiting for us to find it. Sometimes it's right in front of us, sometimes we got to dig a little deeper, but it's always worth the journey.
I love that. That's a great way to end this. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been really eye-opening.
It was my pleasure, and to everyone listening, keep those minds sharp and stay curious.